Welcome to Cape Town Conversations 2025. Today we are here for the session Beyond Eurocentrism, Europe's Global Reorientation. We have with us Dr. Zsuzsa Anna Frenzy from the Martens Center, Belgium, and we have Sergei Potapkins from the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. Welcome, both of you. I'll start with a very large question. In the post-Trumpian order, in the post-Trumpian world, what is the status of the transatlantic relationship? And more largely, do we still have an idea of the collective West, an economic, a political, and more importantly, an ethical idea of the West? We'll start with Zsuzsa.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. It's a very big question, but it's an important question if we want to unpack Europe's global and geopolitical relevance. So I would say that the transatlantic relations are surviving. I think barely surviving. We have an unprecedented low level of trust. And I think what we are seeing under the presidency of Donald Trump is deeply shifting transatlantic relations in a direction that Europe was not prepared for. So I would say that Europe is not ready to live up on its own to address the new security challenges, but Europe is getting ready to be able to defend itself. So this takes me directly to the question of why we need to talk about the future of transatlantic relations from Europe's perspective, because we're deeply dependent on the US for our own security. So in the short run, because we're facing an aggression in the heart of Europe that Russia has initiated against Ukraine, this is really pushing us in a direction to take things in our own hands. So looking forward, we need to really rethink how we are able to project ourselves vis-a-vis the US, vis-a-vis Russia, and vis-a-vis China. And on the second part of your question, in terms of the collective West and where Europe fits in, I think this is exactly the context we need to unpack, because Europe, as I said, is not ready to lead globally on most global issues that require an immediate response, but Europe is getting ready. And this takes us to partnerships, and perhaps we can unpack that in the next questions.
Sounds good. Before I move to Sergei, I have a very quick follow-up. Do you think there can be a collective West without the US? Yes or no? Or you could take a nuanced take.
Let me just say this. For now, and I think for the foreseeable future, the US will remain an important and perhaps the most important ally for Europe. Although I think we don't see the US as a trusted ally, but we see it as a necessary partner, a big difference. So I think we also need to be, in a way, mindful when we say collective West. I think Europe is part of the West, and it is shaping, I think, global governance in line with established rules that also need to be rephrased. But I think for now, the transatlantic relationship remains of core importance, whatever it is at this stage.
That's a great segue to Sergei. And my question is, you have a fairly different take on the transatlantic relationship from the smaller European states, from the Baltics, from Eastern Europe, Central Europe. Unpack this for us.
Yeah, thank you, Srijan, and thank you for having us here. I also want to thank ORF for this opportunity to listen for amazing speakers and also to study Global South from inside. Yes, we are talking about the Eurocentrism, or shifting of Eurocentrism, and also maybe of getting out of Eurocentrism. And I'll try to unpack from the perspective of small European countries. First, my message that the European Union is not united. So it's a mix of independent countries, different languages, currencies, mentalities, threats, income levels, etc., etc. And of course, inside the European Union, we see the different trends. So the first and the main is a core of the European Union is old countries who lived centuries in European-centric world, and by coincidence, this post-colonial countries established the multilateralism, the base of our contemporary order. So those countries created by themselves the order for themselves, and they lived in the European-centric world for centuries. And then, since the end of the World War II, they also enjoyed of this new world order. But there are another group of the EU members. It's actually 1/3 of the European countries now. So this year we have 70 years anniversary from the Bandung meeting. So the root of non-alignment movements, root of the global south. So by fact, in 1955, this 1/3 of European countries was lived under the control of the Soviet Union. So absolutely different system, totalitarian system, which was not shared the same values as so-called European-centric world. And the path to the Europe started for those countries in 1990s, so former Soviet republics and the countries of the Soviet bloc. Usually people do not call these countries as colonies, but by fact they was a colonies. Baltic states, Moldova, the states of Central Asia, the South Caucasian states, the nations who had their sovereign states was gathered by Russian Empire or by the Soviet Union. The Baltic states was occupied by the Soviet Union in order to get back the Russian Empire territories. So by fact, we have in the heart of Europe, we have many countries which we can name the colonial countries. And the colonial countries have 3 times shorter history than the many states of the global south. So, yes,
that's a very good segue to tell us, both of you, the competing perspectives on how Europe, or 2 Europes or 3 Europes or 10 Europes, sees the Indo-Pacific and the larger foreign policy towards the Indo-Pacific. Break it down for us.
Well, I do agree with Sergei that the European Union is not united, but this is no surprise.
Yeah.
No, the European Union is not a country. We've always been a group since the inception in the 50s. We've been a growing group of sovereign countries. And so the beauty of that has been that we have managed to build the European Union, which is the largest trading bloc at this stage in 2025. And we've managed our differences. And in crisis, we've become stronger. So perhaps I do sound, overly optimistic, but this is the reality I see that we have to make the best of. So we are not united, but I also see that in the face of challenges such as we've recently seen because of the Russian aggression. But let's also talk about the pandemic. This was a huge crisis that we were not prepared for. So I did say already that we're not prepared for, and we're still not prepared for, a new reality. That's why we need partners in the Indo-Pacific. So that's a smooth transition there to your question. I see that there is consensus. Let's talk about consensus. There is consensus in the EU that we need to rethink our global weight, our global capacity to project ourselves as a partner to the Indo-Pacific, not as a client, not as a dominant power, but as a partner. And to build a partnership, it takes 2 sides. So it takes us to go to the global south and to the Indo-Pacific with the best offer. And it takes the global south to negotiate that offer. Of course, this gets very complicated and it's not as easy as I make it sound. But although we have differences in terms of how we see the Indo-Pacific, how we see China as the dominant power in the Indo-Pacific, we are on the same page among member states that we need to rethink. We need to move beyond our China fixation, that China is dominant, but we share the concerns with India, with Indonesia, Malaysia, other Southeast Asian countries that China is going to be there. We need to find a way to coexist, but we need to also exercise more agency and to be more in charge of our own future and shaping that together along shared values and interests with countries. So I do want to come back to the China question. Perhaps we can unpack,
We'll
but I'll let
circle
you,
back to it,
Sergey, perhaps has a different view on that.
Yeah.
No, I can agree with you. Of course, yes. I agree with your very first message that transatlantic relations survived, and it's also because all, the countries I mentioned, the newest countries, they share the values of the European Union. But in questions of foreign policy, just particular problem that small countries of Europe do not have capacity, do not have some human resources, and just physically cannot provide permanent ambassadors on the place. And those countries are like reopening the global south for themselves. And from this perspective, for the old countries, it's easy to be here. So that's why quite often the small countries just choose to follow or not to have any position among the global trends of Europe. So also in the question of relations, for example, with China and India and South Africa and Brazil. So sometimes we just see this kind of reaction just to check and see what the Brussels will say. So in the questions.
Yeah. On now that we're talking about Indo-Pacific, let's actually talk about the elephant in the room, China. And is there a European consensus on the China question? Because what we've seen is the larger European strategy and the larger strategy of the West vis-a-vis the export controls, it's been a double-edged sword. It's allowed the West in a certain way to rally around a particular issue, but it's also really expedited some of Chinese tech advancements. We've seen how fast their chip development has gone and a plethora of other technologies. Is there a consensus within Europe about the China question? B, and more largely, what do you think should be the ideal China policy?
Well, it's a complicated situation, I would say. It does relate to what Sergey was also explaining so well in terms of small states not having perhaps their own strategies and feeling like they need to follow the bigger countries. And in this case, clearly, Baltics are smaller. But someone said recently there are no small states. They're just strong states or weak states. And I think that's a nice thought. And I don't like to refer to EU sovereign states as small and big and relevant and less relevant. But in the case of our China policy, the highest relevance, clearly countries such as Germany, France, Italy, these countries clearly are the most dominant voices in shaping that policy. But on that note, I also would like to add that if we take the case of Lithuania, I mean, punching way above its weight with its own Indo-Pacific strategies. And this is part of the EU. This is a voice internally coming from a small state that is shaping the EU's China strategy. And this takes me to your question. Again, there is consensus on the need to change because we are in a immensely imbalanced relationship with China, where we are being taken advantage of. In the case of trade relations and the economy, we have had this hope and I think a genuine intention to work with China together and to contribute to China's development. China is no longer rising. China is an emerged economy with huge power and influence in the Indo-Pacific and beyond, shaping global governance with initiatives in security development, global governance, connectivity, infrastructure, and Europe is catching up. But at the same time, I think we need to remember that for China, Europe remains an important partner. So that there comes in the question of our leverage. Do we have leverage over China? And how do we manage this fragmentation inside the EU when it comes to China? Because that's exactly what Beijing likes to exploit.
Also, how do you create leverage? How do you create leverage vis-a-vis China, which is a question that almost every major country now faces?
Well, economic
Yeah,
security
yeah.
is closely linked to national security. And we are in an age of technology where we know that China is immensely making immense progress. And we need to identify ways, not just tools, to protect our interests, but also, again, as you say, to create leverage.
Yeah.
And so I think we are in the process of figuring this out. You also asked what is the best China policy,
Yeah,
perhaps. And
yeah.
I think the best China policy is one that allows us and empowers us to stay united, not speak with one voice, I would say, because I don't think that will ever be possible given that we are so different, but we do converge. And I think the best China policy is one that allows us to protect our interests, also to play a positive role in the Indo-Pacific, an area of global growth where partners want us to be more relevant. And what would make us more relevant there? I would say more presence. So European countries, again, it comes down to member states. So again, a good point that the EU is its member states and the member states are the EU. It goes both ways.
Yeah. Sergey, on the China question.
You mentioned already the case of Lithuania, but even in this case, the Baltic states do not have some united position. But what is important for all of us, I mean the three Baltic states, is of course is the situation in Ukraine. While China saved the Russian economy and allow them to continue the war, it's impossible to have any pragmatic dialogue between the Baltic states and China. Even see the efforts of China to restart relations and go to the normality. For example, Latvia have quite neutral relations now with China. Still, the Ukrainian question will be the main question for the Baltic states, because this war is an existential question for the small states of Europe. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I just want to expand on that because it's not just the Baltic states. And going back to the idea of consensus, there is a consensus that for Europe in its relationship with China, the biggest problem is China enabling the aggression in Ukraine by enabling Russia. So this is beyond the Baltics. This is the entire Central Eastern European and the entire European Union. So I think China has been, I think we've sent that message to Beijing since February 2022, but it seems like that message is not getting across. And I don't see Beijing really making any effort to play a more constructive role in seeing this a just end to this conflict. So I think again that's beyond the Baltics, and it concerns our China policy.
Now that we're talking about Ukraine, it's a great point. It's a great moment to come back and end on the last question. At the height of the Japanese scare in the 80s, when everyone in America, everyone in the policy circle felt that it's going to be the new superpower, Sam Huntington said, well, I'm not going to take them seriously. They don't have a serious security state. And you can't take a country seriously that is not a serious security state. I think that's a reckoning that Europe has faced now. We're on the cusp of seeing the rise of Europe as a serious security actor, both at the regional system and the larger global system. Is this a blip or is this a permanent rupture? Both of you.
I go first. So in terms of Europe emerging as a security provider, I think in that conversation, we need to define security. Security today is economic security, national security, technology, and the race for technology. And there is also the intention and the growing capacity of countries to use hybrid warfare and gray zone activities to undermine other countries without using hard traditional security. So I think we are stepping up in our relationship with India and countries in the global south. We are seizing this opportunity to become more relevant in shaping the future of the security landscape. We are reshaping our own security landscape, but the question of how we go forward with Russia and with China in that relationship will be key. So perhaps I pass it on to you on that note. But I think there is an opportunity here for us. And it's actually, perhaps let me rephrase, it's not an opportunity. I don't think we have a choice because this is the new reality that we are preparing for. And I started with that, so perhaps that's my last thought on how we are preparing.
Great. Sergey, last
So
thoughts.
first, European defense sovereignty is growing. So we see the threats of, let's say, last processes among Trump administration and Europe. Second, again, my favorite from the perspective of the small states, I believe that the eastern flank now is strongest among NATO inside European Union. So we understand the importance of defense. We are the leaders in rising defense spendings. We are leaders in building cooperation. We are building the Baltic Defense Line. We established the drone coalition. Also the Finland and Sweden is a huge investment into the regional security, as well as Poland. So still, of course, we have plenty of problems, even among the Baltic states, Poland and Nordic, and of course in Europe in general. But we go very fast. Nevertheless, the several countries are absolutely outcomers, no? So
Outliers,
yes.
Leaders.
So,
Yes. Great. The rise of defense sovereignty in Europe. I think it's fair to say when that happens, we probably started entering a new geopolitical cycle post the Second World War. Thank you both for a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.